Hello everyone, welcome back. This video is about another short story by Anton Chekhov. Surprise, surprise. If you're following along with that collection, selected stories of Anton Chekhov, I'll put the cover here usually. In that collection, The Malefactor is the fourth story. And it's quite short, similar to the first three that I recently discussed. Okay, this story is, we could say, it's about the law. I mean, one possible way, one relatively obvious way of reading it is in terms of the law or the legal process. And when we think about the law, we might think about how we are treated, or we are supposed to be treated equally before the law. We're all equal before the law. That means nobody's supposed to receive preferential treatment. There's no favoritism. There shouldn't be any bias or favoritism in favor of or towards one person just because they are that person. I mean, what makes a difference is the discriminations that the law itself makes, not who occupies the different positions that the law discriminates. So the law might discriminate the aggressor and the victim, and it doesn't matter which specific person is occupying the position of the aggressor. So this is what is meant by the veil of ignorance, that the legal process should go according to the logic of that what the law determines, according to the reasoning through the case, not being biased in favor of a particular person. So when there is bias, when there's favoritism, there is breakdown in the legal process. We deviate from the ideal of the law. But there are other ways in which I think, and there's another way, maybe more basic way in which there could be a failure or a breakdown in the legal process. And I think Chekhov is showing that, and that is, it has to do with this assumption. I think that we tacitly make this assumption that when we are before the law, when we come before the law, we are sharing a common ground. We are sharing a common ground of understanding, that we see, at least eventually, we see the same situation through the perspective of the law or the judge or a jury, and we agree with that decision and see eye to eye, and we accept that, whatever that decision is. But we come to a common understanding, we come to a resolution. And that understanding, some degree of understanding is necessary to begin that process. And in this story, that understanding is just not there. And because it is not there, and because it is assumed by one side, the judge assumes the understanding, and every time the person who is accused, the peasant, there's a peasant by the name Denis Grigoriev. Every time Denis Grigoriev says something descriptive of his situation, descriptive of the events as he saw them, the judge says something like, "You don't get it," or "You're lying." So those deviations are mischaracterized by the magistrate. And until the end, that misunderstanding continues, and until the end, the misunderstanding is neglected and invisible to the magistrate, to the judge. And we get this treatment of this situation in the form of, predominantly, the story is satirical. So it comes across as funny, even though towards the end it gets quite serious and tragic, because they are ruining a person's life. Okay, so let's read, what is this story? What is actually happening? I'm jumping to the second paragraph. The first paragraph is a detailed description of Denis Grigoriev, ending with the sentence, "He is barefoot." So it's a description of him as down to earth, as a little bit messy, hardworking person, a working person, and patched trousers, uncombed, matted hair. And okay, so that's first paragraph. Second paragraph, the magistrate begins to talk and he says, Denis Grigoriev, come closer and answer my questions. So this actually evokes in my mind, this brings to mind the idea that we are assuming that before the law we connect. It's a way for us to come together and connect. We go together to a judge and we ask the judge to decide who is right, which interpretation is correct. Come closer and answer my questions. And then the magistrate continues. He says, on the 7th day of July instant, the railroad watchman Ivan Semyonovich Akinfov, proceeding along the line in the morning at the 91st mile post, found you unscrewing one of the nuts by means of which the rails are fastened to the ties. Here is that nut, with which nut he also detained you. Is that how it went? Denis Grigoriev says, what? And the judge repeats, did it all go as Akinfov explains? And the peasant Denis Grigoriev says, sure it did. And we find that Denis Grigoriev, his attitude, he has this optimism towards the magistrate. He thinks that he gets it, that he understands him. And he says, yeah, that's right. And he tries to explain that they use these nuts as sinkers. So when they're fishing, the fishing hook to which maybe a worm or some bait is attached, it can go further down, go deeper into the water if something heavy is attached to that hook. So he says it's a common practice. We use these nuts to fish. And then he goes into some detail talking about the different kinds of fish, and the judge is confused. Says, what are you telling me about gobies for? And he says, like, you ask yourself. So the judge is seeing these as disruptions, and he sees them as he's like disturbing him. He's interfering with his legal process. He wants to get a confession about another nut that he has unscrewed, and he easily gets that confession. He said, eventually he says, there's one that my friend gave me, and there's another one that I unscrewed on a separate day. But he doesn't know that these are confessions. He later explains that they're careful. They do these unscrewing of the nuts thoughtfully. They don't remove all of them to make sure that the trains are, in their mind, the trains are not derailed. At some point, the judge says, I see why a train went off the rails last year. I understand. Implying that I know it was your fault. Or fault of others who did similar crimes. And Grigoriev doesn't get what this I understand means. He's just upset that the watchman, had arrested him, had beat him, and that upset is on his mind. And then so he continues, he responds to that, I understand, by saying, that's what you get educated for. So you'll understand, most merciful judges. The Lord knew who to give understanding to. And here you've considered how and what. But a watchman's the same as a peasant. He's got no understanding. He just grabs you by the scruff of the neck and drags you off. Reason first and then drag. Like they say, peasant head, peasant thoughts. Write this down too, Your Honor, that he hit me twice in the teeth and the chest. So poor guy doesn't know that this is he's getting closer to being judged as guilty of a crime. Eventually, the judge says, okay, you're guilty, you're going to prison. And Grigoriev says, to prison? Your Honor, I haven't got time. He doesn't say, it's not fair for me to go to prison. He says, I haven't got time. So his life, his situation, the way he sees his situation is formed, it's shaped by the concerns of his practical concerns of the day to day. He can't see the situation in terms of a fair judgment. So I haven't got time. I have to go to the fair, and I also get 3 rubles from Yegor for the lard. The judge says, quiet, don't disturb me. And then Grigoriev, we see that he is, even now, he's misunderstanding his this judgment, this sentence. And he thinks that it has something to do, not with the nut that he had unscrewed, but with his brother who owes somebody money. He's trying to make sense of this sentence. And he says, okay, we are three brothers, Kuzma Grigoriev, Yegor Grigoriev, and me, Denis Grigoriev. And at this point, the judge says, Semyon, take him away. And he's thinking, we are three brothers. And he says, brother's not answerable for brother. Kuzma doesn't pay, and you, Denis, have to answer. Judges. So he thinks that it's because of his brother. The legal process has failed to make him recognize what he's guilty of. They have failed to communicate, but the judge doesn't see that failure. At the end, we get something that, even though Grigoriev didn't understand what it was that he's been going through, there is truth to what he says at the end. He says, judges, our late master, the general, died. May he rest in peace. Otherwise, he'd show you, judges, something. You've got to judge knowingly, not just anyhow. Give a whipping even, but so as it's for a reason, in all fairness. It's a really ridiculous moment when the magistrate is saying Article 1081 of the Criminal Code says that anyone knowingly damaging the railroad is guilty, should be punished in terms of hard labor, punishable by a term at hard labor. And they're taking him there. But this way of handling the people who are unscrewing the nuts attached to by means of which the railroads are fastened to the ties, this is not going to take care of that issue, unless if they imprison all of the people who are fishing and are using nuts in this way. Is it possible to take this story, this pattern of the story, and transpose it to other situations beyond the law? I think it is. Here we have a person, the judge, who is sitting above, who's taking a higher position, but the judge is not in tune or in touch or informed about the details of these peasants' lives, what they know, what they are dealing with. That's if you're in a workplace, and if you're a worker, and if you're dealing with a manager, a superior, who gives you orders but is not in tune and informed with your the way in which you deal with those tasks in a day-to-day basis. This manager might come to you and make demands, make requests, and point to things like you're working slowly, you should work faster, not realizing that you are close to this task at hand, and maybe you know better. Maybe it's the thing that, in theory, the manager is asking for is not possible. Being out of touch with the concrete state of affairs is giving this judge or the manager or anybody who is occupying a higher position and judging. It's not only giving them an illusion of knowing, an illusory understanding, saying, oh, I get this lazy worker, this person, or I know this peasant is a malefactor, is ruining, is destroying the railroads and costing lives. They not only have that misunderstanding and illusion, but also have the power to damage this other person's life, to hurt them, to judge them and to hurt them. So this is, it's despite the fact that it's a satire, that it's funny to read, but it's pointing out something that is a real possibility in these asymmetric human relationships, when one person is out of touch with the concrete reality, but has the power to judge, and the other person has a different understanding and doesn't know what is going on in the mind of this superior. This is something that is still happening and continues to happen. Okay, So that's one way to think about this story. If you have other thoughts, I'd love to read them. The next story in this collection is, let me check, Panikida. Oh, okay. I will post a video about that hopefully on next Tuesday. Until then.